Hola, soy Ale Cavial, directora de Fundación Hypatia. Un fuerte abrazo de bienvenida a todos quienes nos están escuchando hoy en nuestro canal de YouTube. Estamos muy contentos de retomar nuestro ciclo de entrevistas Redes Virtuosas, realizándose ya hace 9 años para conocer en profundidad a seres humanos despiertos, que son un ejemplo vivo de cómo transitar de una cultura egocéntrica, mecanizada e industrial a una nueva cultura y civilización ecocéntrica, delicada, amorosa y regeneradora de la vida. En Hypatia los invitamos a escuchar, a sentir y a sostener en su corazón esta entrevista para abrir la posibilidad de nuevas formas de ser y de pensar y trascender juntos así nuestro antiguo mindset que hoy sabemos nos conduce al colapso social y de la naturaleza. Y para comenzar este ciclo 2023, hoy tenemos como invitado desde Portugal a Rishi, quien con solo 26 años experimentó un despertar espiritual donde espontáneamente se desvaneció su sentido de identidad, permitiendo la experiencia directa de la conciencia pura. Después de un año de sentarse en silencio a leer todo lo que podía encontrar para ayudar a aclarar lo que acababa de experimentar, este joven publicista portugués volvió a su exitosa carrera en la industria del marketing, donde consiguió más y más éxito. Sin embargo, a los 34 años de edad, después de una muy profunda decepción por la dirección en la que él y el mundo se movían, fue golpeado por la misma experiencia que había vivido unos años atrás, dándose cuenta que esta no era una experiencia, sino la verdad misma de nuestro ser. Esta claridad lo transforma tan profundamente que decide dejar atrás su vida e ir al encuentro de personas que podrían confirmar y apoyar lo que había sucedido dentro de él. Después de diferentes viajes místicos a distintas partes del mundo, que incluyeron conocer a Don Lauro, un amoroso chamán en México, caminar sobre la misma tierra que caminó Jesús, conocer a Eckhart Tolle en Hawái, y luego realizar su primer retiro en silencio con Ashanti en California. Después de todo esto, él regresa a Portugal, su país natal, donde encuentra a su maestro espiritual. Desde entonces, Rishi, nombre que le dio su maestro y en sánscrito significa sabio, vive en el campo de Alentejo, en el sur de Portugal, muy cerca del monte Sahaya, donde su maestro Muji y una comunidad de personas están dedicadas a la liberación total del ego y a la realización completa del ser. Así que antes de empezar esta conversación con él, que está aquí con nosotros, voy a citar sus palabras. Querer salvar al mundo sin salvarnos a nosotros mismos es ego. Naturalmente el ego prefiere ser salvador a reconocer que él mismo es la causa del problema. La respuesta siempre será primero dentro y luego afuera. Primero el ser y después el hacer. Así que muy bienvenido, Rishi. Very welcome, Rishi. How are you?
Thank you so much, Aleka. I think I understood everything.
That's good. We are so happy to have you here. We have been having different conversations with Rishi, and we are so happy that finally we can do this interview for all our community. So let's start. And we always start our interviews, Rishi, talking about childhood. And we would like to know how was yours and what signs of what you are today were already there.
Let me see how to simplify. So my childhood was very beautiful. Of course, I experienced the same, I would imagine the same kind of upbringing as many people, where you have loving parents. I'm not saying everyone has loving parents, but loving parents that love you, that of course they themselves are unconscious of many things. And so I also experienced that kind of confusion. I remember being a child and looking at my parents, seeing them arguing and thinking to myself, but what's happening? Because nothing was happening on the exterior. So they were arguing about things that I couldn't see. So from then there was already an intuition that something is quite crazy about human beings. But I had a wonderful childhood with, I have 2 sisters. There was a lot of space to explore and to be ourselves. And I had a very close relationship with Jesus Christ growing up. So I was raised Catholic. I don't know if that had a part of it or not, but I had a very direct relationship with Jesus Christ. I wouldn't even say with the religion or being Catholic, but just with him. I would communicate with him daily. I would not go to sleep without speaking to him. Whenever something beautiful happened, I would be thanking him. So there was something very alive in me. Of course, there wasn't I was not aware of what Jesus Christ actually was, but there was some intuition that knew that there is this being that could walk with me along the way. And so he was a part of my life always. And besides that strong relationship with Jesus Christ, I had some moments. I remember one specifically. I don't know how old I was, but I would say 9, 10 years old, and I was laying in my bed, and I remember just looking at my hand, and something in that moment knew that there was no one in the hand. It became obvious that there's no person to whom this hand belongs to, that this hand was part of everything, and everything was a part of this hand. So this is like I remember it because it was a very strong, clear experience of what I would come to understand later on. But other than that, nothing that stands out that I even remember.
Okay. And then you had a radical experience, no? At year 26, and you were left in silent with no sense of me. And how was that experience for you?
Yeah, so that's so I had no spiritual background. I had religious background, but I had no spiritual background. I'd never even all these words and terms that I know today related to spirituality. I had none of these in my vocabulary back then. So I didn't know like spirituality in any way. But at the age of I believe it's 26, I was experiencing a lot of suffering in a relationship that I was in. That was provoking something very acute within my mind, where the mind was almost in a fight with itself, almost like there's two beings fighting, and due to the intensity of that experience, it provoked something took place where I was no longer in the experience. I was observing the whole thing. So I was watching the whole, and in that moment that I noticed that I was not even involved in the experience. At the time, I thought I'd gone nuts. So I thought I was crazy. But I heard a very angelical voice from within that just said, relax, everything is okay, go to sleep. And that night, I to this day, it was the best sleep I've ever had. It's hard to explain, but I can remember the sleep of that night still today. It was just so profound, so total, so what a rest. And when I woke up in the morning, of course, I'm telling the experience looking back. At the time, there was no one there to narrate. But when I woke up, there was a clear sense, so there was some consciousness that something was different because everything was more alive, like the light coming through the window, the dust particles in the air, the colors of the things in my house, everything was very alive. There was something very beautiful, very, very beautiful. And so there was a sense that something of that nature was happening, but nothing much. I went about my routine, getting dressed, getting into my car. And as I'm driving to work, I noticed that everywhere I look, everything is the same. So I would look at my car, and it was kind of like a vibration. It was just like an energetic vibration. And then I would look at a stone. I'd look at some trees, everything. And then I'd look at the ocean. Everything was vibration, was just light vibration. And that started to create some very deep good emotional, kind of crying. Something was. Then, as I arrived to work, something asked itself, what about me? What about people? Is this also? And so then I looked at someone and I could see same, all the same, everything same. So then I literally broke down. I just broke down crying. I could feel that something profound was taking place, but I wasn't there. I'm telling it looking back. I wasn't there. I wasn't experiencing that. That was the experience. It was, and that lasted for, I cannot say, but like maybe 2 or 3 days, that state of absolute emptiness, absolute oneness was just the state I found myself in. But remember, there's no I having that state. This is just language does this duality. So after a few days, after some time, the sense of a me started to come back. And in that moment, there was this almost extreme opposite situation, because the sense of a me realizes that I don't exist in the way that I imagined. That this is not, the world is not what we imagine it to be. This was the first time that in this body, in this one, it was being experienced directly like that, where it literally, I remember at the time, in terms of metaphor, it literally was like this whole world. Imagine a beautiful building, but outside they've put this whole scaffolding. You know what scaffolding is? When they fix buildings? So there's this entire scaffolding around, and we live in this scaffolding.
Yes.
And this is where we live, but that's not where life is. The house in the center, this beautiful house in the center, that's the world, but we're in the scaffolding. So I don't think it's the best metaphor, but it's the one that came up at the time. But a deep kind of existential, I wouldn't say fear, but almost like a complete loss of direction. Because if I don't exist, then who's living here? Who does what? What makes me do anything? Who's leading the show? So that completely created this wave where even then at that time, I left the job that I had. And then I had a friend who had a beautiful house in the pine forest, and I sat by his pool every day, kind of reading books. We have to remember, this is like 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And in my specific case, there were no references, nothing around that, or anyone that had such an experience, or that I knew of, or a book that I had, nothing. I had no reference, nothing. So I just started buying books as they showed up. I mean, I guess intuition was doing it. And I spent about 8 months to a year just sitting next to this, laying down next to this pool, reading all these books, trying to make sense of what had taken place. And amongst those books was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. There were many. I truly believe I read more than 100 books during that period. But The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle gave me a lot of rest, because it was like reading myself. But there were others. There was Conversations with God that I thought was very beautiful too, by Neil Donald Walsh. The Road Less Traveled. There were a few that helped to give some stability to, because when you have an experience of that magnitude, which I call it being hit by grace, your sense of identity it gets very disoriented. Mm. Yes, so these books helped to stabilize a bit.
And how was the process to going back to work and going back to life?
Yes. So at some point, I just had coins. I'd run out of all my money, and I remember very literally looking at where I keep my coins on the entrance to the house and thinking to myself, okay, maybe I need to go back into the world. Maybe I cannot survive like this. So. Yeah, slowly but surely something operated and went back into a world that I was very familiar with, very good at. So it quite easily found itself going back in. and in a way more easily, more because there was this intelligence that had awoken within me. And when I say intelligence, is of course it's the intelligence within everyone, but because, yeah, it's almost like opened up my faculties. My brain had been opened, so there was more sensibility, more intuition, more understanding. I mean, there are many, different beings have different experiences, but there was, I had many mystical experiences during those 8 months, and one of them was that I could hear somebody speak, and it's almost like I could see where the words had originated from in his own family generations before. This is of no use, but I'm just saying that the capacity of this mind body is infinite, actually. And so that started to permeate a little bit into my profession, into work. And so I'm sure that helped to do good work. But eventually, after a few years of working and going up the ladder and arriving at the so-called top, this that had awoken was obviously there. I wasn't conscious of that, but it was obviously there, and not finding fulfillment in the way I was moving. Because of course, looking back, I can say this, at the time I didn't know, but looking back, what took place was that the ego, the sense of a me, came back almost with a vengeance. You see, this is kind of how it works. It's like the ego got chopped, but it didn't get chopped completely. So whatever was left, it almost built an even stronger shell, because now it knows it's under threat. So it has to get even more tight, more strong. But yeah, as you spoke in the introduction, thanks to grace, what I call grace, it was not going to last, and it announced itself again in me very strongly.
And then you decide to leave your work now in the marketing industry, and to travel around the world to look for different teachers, as we just said. And,
yes.
And now that you mentioned the ego, let's go to that subject. Well, you travel around the world. That's so funny. You travel around the world meeting different teachers, and then you go back to Portugal and you find your teacher, your true teacher, very close to your home. And you're there now. That's so funny, so amazing, just beside, just there in front of you. And let's talk about the ego. There are many different definitions of ego. And when you talk about ego mind, that we are going to be talking about this, what do you mean? And why so many teachers around the world focus on the ego? It seems all the teachers go there, no?
Yes. Well, ego, obviously, it's just a word. We have to use these words. But for example, growing up, ego for myself simply meant someone that had like maybe a strong personality, or very self-centered, very arrogant, that thinks a lot of himself. That's how I used to understand ego. But the way I use ego today, and the teachers and the beings that I've met, is not, of course, in that way. It's in a much more broad, inclusive way. So ego, like when I say ego, and I believe when others refer to it, it's simply the belief that we are who we think we are. So, it seems very easy to say these words, but it's actually a complete blind spot in humanity. No one thinks that they are living who they think they are. They think that is who they are. So ego refers to that. Ego refers to this belief that I consciousness Who I am, which has no name, is this person with its history, its memories, what it likes, what it doesn't like, this combination of thoughts, beliefs, memories, that's who I am. And if you come to a more deeper understanding of our nature, you realize that's not who we are. That is included in who we are. But what we are is beyond that.
Okay, so let's go directly to who we are. What is beyond that?
Well, you're gonna have to find out. No, no, this is where language stops. Yes. So
okay, that's what you have to. That's what you find out when you go in a spiritual journey.
Yes. So the reason for the focus on ego is because what we are already. It's not something that you can create. It's not something you can imagine. It's not something that you can get to, because we are that already. So we can only see where it is that we're believing that we're not. You see, we can remove what's in the way of recognizing the obviousness of what we are. So the reason to focus on the ego, because the ego is this attachment to what we think, to what we feel, to these things are what keeps the very obviousness of this direct experience of what we are to be lived. So that's, if somebody asks, who am I? That's a very direct question. Most human beings are not ready for that answer. They're asking it from a mental standpoint, because we intellectually want to understand these things, but you can't get there like that. It's a very, very direct question. You have to be already a very, very mature consciousness, has to have already removed itself from a lot of delusion in order to receive that kind of direct pointing, because
So the focus on the mind and on the ego of all the teachers around the world talking about to watch and observe the ego is to realize what we are not.
So both movements are happening. So there are words that we use in the same way we use ego. We use words like awareness, your being, infinite. There are words that also refer to what we are. Yes, but they're just words. They can never be what we are. So language will always do this, but obviously there will be moments where you can invite someone to experience directly what they are, and in doing so, they come to see what they're not. You see, so it can work both ways. You can invest in trying to see what's your ego, or you can recognize yourself, and that shows you your ego. There's no one way. It's a dance that's changing in every day, in every moment. But of course, ego ultimately is just difficult for me, because I'm trying to explain to you something that is already a falsity for myself. Because ego is obviously untrue. It's unreal. There is no such thing as ego. We need to go out and figure out what's the ego. Let's get rid of the ego. We got to kill him and cut his head off. This is all illusion also, you see. Yes. But at different stages of consciousness, which every human being is in, there is not one human being on this planet that is not on the path to awakening. We're just not conscious of it, but this is what this is all about. Everyone is a part of this moving into a higher and deeper understanding of what we are. It's actually consciousness that's doing it. There's no person doing it. We could not, if it was possible, we would just say, wake up, realize ourselves. It's not like this. This one that wants to wake up realizes that he himself is the illusion.
Okay. So
please bring me in where you need to.
Yes.
So I don't go to.
Yes, we are like in the terms first, so we don't get confused. after. But so let's try to explain what is consciousness. What is consciousness? Because a lot of people is talking about consciousness, no? How to develop consciousness, what is the difference between consciousness and awareness, and the difference between consciousness and my ego or personality. So let's try to define this. Okay.
Yes. So
okay.
Consciousness, I think I know what you're asking. I know you didn't quite finish, but so consciousness in this play that we're in appears in all these forms, and one of the forms is the human being, the one that's here talking to you. And in this form, there's a capacity. Consciousness has created a mind-body system where it can delude itself into believing that it is something other than consciousness. And it does that intentionally. None of this is a mistake. It does that intentionally. It wants to experience itself as separate. Because if you know your consciousness all the time, then you can't play the game. I'm being playful now. So it creates this kind of sense of an individual person that can have an autonomous life, doing whatever he wants, coming up with his own dreams. But of course, this is all happening inside consciousness. It's all under the permission of consciousness. But, well, it's by design, consciousness in these individual forms has forgotten itself, has literally the idea that it wanted to forget itself worked. And so consciousness, which in these forms has a mind of its own, consciousness goes through this mind, and each mind is its own mind. And that serves as almost like a filter. So that when consciousness comes through, this influences consciousness into manifesting the various things that we see, from really beautiful to horrendous, depending on the mind, the hookup, the psyche that has been accumulated in this world. So yes, consciousness is responsible for everything. Yes. And yet consciousness wants to become aware of itself.
Yes, and probably we have the free will. We have been given the free will to explore this consciousness and go back home, no, and do a transformation process. But in the moment that we are now in the world, going to the world, it's like everything. It's like we have lost this this capacity of connecting with a pure consciousness, or going back to our source. You talk a lot in your posts about doing, no? That we lost the capacity of not doing. So what happened there? I would like to ask you what happened that we didn't commune with consciousness in a healthy way.
These are not small questions, no, that you're asking. And of course, no one on this planet has the complete answer. We have versions, we have our own interpretations. The truth is the truth, but the interpretation varies. It's not that someone lost consciousness or they lost their connection to consciousness. There never was someone. You see, this is very difficult to transmit, of course.
Yes. You
see, it is all consciousness, but consciousness in all these bodies, having identified itself with that specific mind and body. So consciousness identified itself with this mind and body, which means that whatever this mind is thinking, body, that will be my experience. And that experience will translate into what we see. So this play that was designed by the creator is showing, obviously, the danger or the malfunction that can happen when consciousness forgets itself completely.
So as we believe that we are separated from everything, and that we have no possibilities, or we are,
yeah, so from the point of view,
the limitations we are living are because our limited mind, right?
From the point of view of the absolute, or from the point of view of a person.
Mm-hmm.
From the point of view of a person, we are disconnected. We have lost our way. We have tormented by all sorts of negative thoughts. We have terrible beliefs. We're filled with fear. We want a better world, but we ourselves are a mess, you know? So from the point of view of the person, all this is happening. And yes, at some point, there's an intuition that the person senses and realizes, there's something that we're missing. There's something truer to this experience that I'm having, and to the way I look at the world, the way I think of the world. And that intuition, which is grace, again, I use that word, which is the self, is what we're also feeling in the world. In the same way we're seeing all this darkness play out, it is also noticeable that more consciousness is entering the world, because we would not see the darkness. The darkness is just becoming very evident because there's a lot of light. It's, you know, it's those old sayings and metaphors which are very obvious, but they're not obvious until they're obvious. Which is, it is because consciousness is announcing itself more and more, this whole world of mind is starting to look very dysfunctional, extremely asleep, which it is.
Yes. And Rishi, which practices have been the most useful for you to be more aware of consciousness, and more in the present, and more in the capacity of seeing? Which practices do you think have been the most important for you?
Yes, so for myself, of course, I've been around so many beings on this path. And of course, I see that each one has their own way, their own walk. This path that is not a path to anywhere. It's important that I just clarify that it's a path. It's all happening within. It's a path within, towards within, to the realization of what's within, which is this, which is everything. But in my specific case, I was not into practices in general, but it just wasn't in my nature. In my specific case, I would say, deeply fortunate that I would come to manifest, so to speak, an awake being himself that would serve as the direct evidence of what I'm searching for, which is in India what they call the guru, no, the spiritual master. Someone who has cracked open and consciousness is fully fledged, and of course, when you're in the company of such beings, it serves as it's when you're in that kind of presence, there is no practice. You're just imbibing and drinking and listening, and it's the self loving itself, consciousness talking to consciousness. It's just this, which is why it's the good grace of meeting someone like that. But again, it was destined for this apparent one to meet someone like that. Someone else might not meet a walking master, might find him directly within. You see, because if I'm going too far and too, you can tell me, and I can try to, as much as possible, make it more understandable. But a master, obviously, he is a representation. He's like you, like myself. These are just the forms, but in that form, the self is awake, and that self is not there. It's here. It's there. It's in all our hearts. So when you actually meet the self, you meet everyone else, because there is no other.
How beautiful.
You just meet the self. The self is one. It's not even one. It's just the self.
Yes, and with the true teachers, it's more evident, no? This force, this energy, this presence.
But to go back to practices, because of course it's not totally, it was not like I didn't practice things, but they just came in a very organic way. I didn't intentionally, I'm going to practice this in order to understand, or as you saw from my story, the story of me, that life unfolded in a very specific way, where grace was coming and things were happening without me having practiced anything at all. On the contrary, I was living quite a fun life in the world, quite what's the word, filled with the senses, everything on full firing, full pistons. So for myself, it was just coming from within. But along this journey, of course, I love sitting quietly. I find sitting quietly one of the most impactful ways. And I don't even say meditation, because meditation has become such a doing. You see, even meditation we've managed to corrupt. You see, meditation feels like you're going to meditate, and it's like, it's already too much. But to sit quietly is a very powerful, and you know it's powerful because hardly anybody can do it. Nobody can just sit. Don't do anything. Don't meditate. Don't, just sit quietly. You don't see it happening. You know, maybe for 30 seconds, maybe 40 seconds. But after a minute, they're fidgeting something, picking something, walking something. Like, very difficult to just be quiet for a few minutes. Just here, doing nothing. Just allowing for this being to show itself. So that I enjoy very much. Of course, watching satsang. In my case, I was in the company of someone that was offering satsang all the time. So, but satsang is a very powerful tool. It's not even tool. Practice. Yeah, to listen to the words of those that are already in the direct experience of what we are is so powerful, so direct.
What it means, satsang, you told me, but I don't remember.
Yeah, so it's also a Sanskrit word, and it means association with truth. So you're in the company of truth. So it's like speaking words that are in truth, from truth, about truth. Because that is, I would say, the biggest, most beautiful shift in mankind, is that so many people can already speak about what we are, but still very few speak as what we are. That shift, that silence that speaks. Yeah, that is the, if you ask me, that is the.
Yes, it is. It is. And as a paradox, so many people feel so afraid of this. We have associated like people who lives there, like in solitude, away from the world, apart from the world, and why do you think we are so afraid of being apart from the world when the world is a mess? It's like a contradiction, no? In your experience.
So the journey out of this illusion of me is not a small thing. It is normal to feel afraid. It is part of this great journey, is to face that fear. Because when we have lived for so long under the belief that this is reality, who I take myself to be, what I want, what you believe, that ideology, this religion, once we have taken all this to be reality, it is very challenging to question all these things. There is an actual visceral experience to the disidentification of consciousness from these, what we call attachments, beliefs. So it is a mighty journey. As my master Muji says, no, like freedom is for free, but it's not cheap. And it's true. The recognition, when it takes place, it's done. It's instant. It's effortless. It is what it is. But the journey of stepping out of identity, stepping out of ego, that is a very visceral and many times scary process. Of course, if anyone would ask anyone like that has already this love inside their heart, this truth, I will immediately say, my goodness, keep jumping and jump from, like, I don't care if you have the worst fear in your life, it's all just nothing. I have compassion for it, but go through it, because it's taking you nowhere. You yourself will come to see that, my goodness, it's just, we are beings of just love and light and understanding, and the way we can experience this world is far from the way we're experiencing it. Very far. I mean, it's we are tormented. This is why it is very clear for myself these days why in Buddhism, like why you heard the Buddha say that he wanted to help remove suffering. He could have said to enlighten beings, but you don't actually hear that he wants to enlighten beings. He wants to end suffering. Mm-hmm. I understand that, because it's almost the idea of awakening people, that's almost like an idea, a fantasy. It's almost not entirely, because this is already all the awake one. There's just this illusion of something else. And the amount of suffering that we are producing on ourselves and others because of this confusion is brutal. Is brutal. Can you imagine that this all-pervading beauty, this isness, this self, is totally untouched by the most horrific thing you can do? Meanwhile, we are doing what we see happening in the world and killing each other by the millions and experiencing horrific things only because of this mistaken sense of identity. Yes. But again, I'm saying this, but it is in God's doing. It is in the greater awareness. It's not one individual's fault. We cannot look at the world like that.
And we spoke once about what Gandhi said, no, and so many teachers, that the transformation and the work is within, and in that way to explore and to connect and to be within, it's much more efficient than so many doing without that experience, right? What do you think about the because we are so many people doing things for getting a better world, but why do you think this way of going in, it's a better way or faster way?
It's not even that. It's the only way. It's the only way. Everything will eventually lead to turning within. There's no other way. People can exhaust their doing, and when they exhaust their doing, they're going to realize, oh, I guess I just have to go in. It's just, it's the way it's like this. It's not an opinion or somebody designed personally like that. No, it is the way out is in. And so as long as we're trying to get out by going out even more, we will suffer more until it turns in. But to turn within is the outcome of every single thing that will ever take place on this earth. It will always lead to the inner realization. It will always lead to recognizing that actually out here, there's actually nothing. What makes out here real is what is real here. No, this very consciousness is what makes reality, brings reality to something that is unreal, because all this vanishes. All this vanishes. It could vanish tomorrow, but things are vanishing all the time. They're not real. That's why Shakespeare said, no, this world is made of the same suchness as dreams are made of. It's true. Anyone can confirm that. It's people have come and gone. Who are they? Where were they?
Yes, it's our construction. It's our mind and thought and feeling construction outside.
The reason it feels real is because we are real. But when I say we, I don't mean this guy here. This goes too. That which is inside all of us is real. It's real forever and ever and ever, for all eternity. And this real is what we're giving to the world in every moment. We're offering it to whatever we have our attention on. I am making my world real because I am giving my reality to it. If I remove my attention from it, that is no longer appears in my existence. It's not of, there's no reality to it. We don't realize the power that lives inside of us. So we are now, because of this complete confusion and loss of identity, and I mean, it's going into very complex territories. Consciousness has really complexified to a degree that, well, we know what's unfolding, but we have all this power and love and reality being given to insane ideas, insane beliefs.
Yes, let's talk about some of these beliefs and ideas that make the confusion, to clarify. We have this obsession with security, safety, and this is a subject that I like very much. This, like, we deny death, we deny aging, suffering. So how these ideas of eternal young, eternal safety are against our self.
Well, they're all born from the same mistake. You see, that's why the conversation always goes to the same place. They're all born of the same mistake, which is something believes it is separate from life. So if you believe that you're this little body in the middle of this world, there's a lot to be afraid of. You need to find safety. It's a legitimate mistake. Because, oh my goodness, you're going to die, you're going to get hurt, you're going to be abused, whatever it is, this little sense of a me is under threat. But it's an illusion, because that is not who you are. What you are cannot be under threat. Now, the irony of all this is that we've manifested this mistake. So we've actually created a very unsafe world. We've created a world where we are abusing each other, where we are hurting each other, where we are creating tremendous suffering on each other. We have manifested it. Why? Because reality, that which we are, consciousness, has the power to make real whatever it puts its attention on and whatever it believes. It's one of the great powers of the human being is belief. What you believe in becomes reality. It's just a gift. So, which is why it's so important to recognize that which isn't a belief, so that you understand the difference between what is and what's a belief. And right now in the world, for the majority of people, no one knows that there's a neutral ground. Everybody believes something. Nobody knows that you can actually not believe it. You can just be. And then the beliefs come as they come or not, but you can just be. This landing ground, this restful place, is what is completely missing in the world right now, which answers also what you were mentioning about the doing. This doing is it's a reflex. It's like a reflex. A bit more complex, this answer, but let me simplify it as much as possible. The doing is a reflex of the uneasiness of not doing. It's not because people want to do. Everybody wants to rest, actually. But resting means that you're gonna very quickly understand that something isn't sitting right.
Mm.
And there is a force, there is an energy field that is uncomfortable with that, which we can call it ego field, ego force, that is not interested in awakening. The ego is not interested in awakening. It is not the ego that wishes to awaken. This is very important. There can be an ego that wants to awaken, but that will not create good fruit, because it's still it is our very self that is calling us in.
Yes.
When someone feels this longing to return home, to rest, it's the very self itself already speaking. And there's a timing to all this. It's not in anyone's hands ultimately. It's we cannot paint broad strokes over the world. Everybody should this or that. It doesn't work like that. That's madness. It's all individual consciousness and individual mind, body, souls, and they all have their timing.
Yes.
What matters is that whoever hears these, whoever is called, that they complete their journey. Not like, but what about them? Forget them. This is another distraction, another way to not really look at yourself.
Okay. We talk also about I want to go back to this you look like unnormal practices or unhealthy practices we have in the world to really identify the difference between being in connection with the heart and what we are living the dominant way of thinking, we are always creating things. We are always creating different technologies, different solutions, and things that weapons and digital world. And now we are in this artificial intelligence, right? And you told me once that this was a mind creating another mind. So I really want to speak about this madness of the mind that we are living in.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Talk a bit about AI, you mean?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so from where I'm looking, the mind itself, the human mind itself, is AI. It's God's AI.
Mm-hmm.
But our very mind is already an intelligence, a tool that you can operate, mm-hmm. that consciousness can operate. Mm-hmm. And most beings are already living under the influence of God's AI. They are not using God's AI, they are under the influence. If you don't know what you are, then your mind is running your life. It's just a fact. Because you are not aware of anything other than your thoughts, your beliefs, your memories. You're not aware of anything other than that. Therefore, that is what's influencing and living out your life. So that in itself is already a kind of a virtual world. Mm-hmm. You're already living in a virtual world that is not even a reflection of what your soul or heart would be living. So inside this mind, that is already a collection of beliefs and concepts and ideas for centuries being accumulated. This mind, this is my view, the mind itself also wants to return home, also wants to return to God, also wants to rest, also wants to lay back. But it itself doesn't know how. So it's looking to do that out in the world by doing. And so it's in a way, it's created itself. It has created itself. It's created another mind. It's produced another mind because that's all it knows. So it's like going deeper and deeper into the mind. And of course, because God is the one that's holding all of this, whatever wrong direction you take, it will always end up here. That's our good fortune. But the question is, but how far do we need to go? How much suffering do we need to have before something just clicks back? And of course, again, this is not in anyone's hands. No one has the answer. But it is in my heart to call it out and to say clearly to whoever wants to hear and even has the ears to hear. It cannot be found that way.
Mm.
It cannot. It cannot. The only reason it will be found that way is because it reaches a culmination point of complete collapse, which then returns to what's here already before any of it had to happen. 10,000 years from now, the realization will be the same. So so this is the evidence, AI, and this is all the evidence that humanity is mainly, if not totally at this point, living from the mind with almost zero connection to the source, which you could call nature, consciousness, life, earth, all of it, because it's all one. So yes, we are witnessing that. We are witnessing how the world looks when you live almost entirely from the mind. And it's a very dead, dry, full control space, a very unhappy space.
Yes, very isolated space.
Very isolated, very confused, very disrespectful. You see it happening in all areas of life. There's a clear desperation in the world, but not yet enough clarity to come to a more deeper understanding of why the desperation. We're still looking out in the world and trying to blame things in the world for our desperation, unaware that it's nothing to do with the outside.
Yes, and if you said also, we have to understand to change the world, no? And in simple words, what is what we need to understand? Because everything is so complex today. Everything is so many words to explain all the processes, all the different ideologies, different way of thinking, etc. What is what we need to understand, simply understand, to change the world?
Well, the world is always changing. So I just want to clarify this. The world is always changing. It was always going to change. So that's not an awake mind is not it's not under the illusion that the world needs to change. This is a very egoic illusion. An awake mind simply knows the root of the suffering of the world. And of course, by design, by default, it wants to help clarify that so that the suffering ends in whichever place, in whichever way, in whichever industry, in whatever. It doesn't matter. That's God's doing. So, of course, the cardinal mistake, the one thing that will bring about peace, love, because changes will always happen. But the one thing that will bring about peace, love, and joy is to remember who we are again. There is no other answer. And of course, each being, some beings are living in one part of the world, some beings are involved in things that are like different. And of course, that understanding will permeate their life, their surroundings, what they do, but not because they were trying to do that. They simply focused on remembering what they are. And in that informs the intelligence knows how to harmonize the world.
Mm.
It always does. And in a way, it's doing it right now in a very strange way to the human mind. It looks like a complete catastrophe, but it's actually a complete saving of humanity. It's saving us from what could be become an even worse kind of reality. Because like I said, consciousness is not concerned in the way that we think as humans.
Yes.
Consciousness is not like, well, kind of, no. So there is this kind of freedom to play out the infinite universes that can play out.
Yes. And
yet there are beings like myself that feel an immense drive, love to remind people of the truth. So in a way, that means consciousness does have that intention also. It isn't completely like, I don't care. Yes. So this is the great paradox of life. In one way, we are completely untouched. And then in another way, we are so much wanting to support and help and change and love and bring clarity.
Yes, and probably the collapse of all these economical and political and society way of being, it's yes. The most natural and healthy way, because yes. So
for now. So I remember years ago, when I realized that the world is the macro of the micro. So the very journey that this one, me, this mind, body, the very journey that I underwent is literally what I'm watching happening in the world. I know what it is for these forces to come and try to grip harder, control more, fight more, not allow for freedom, to not allow. I know what that is. We, at an individual level, we must meet these places. And this is why I understand why it's happening outside. I know that these beings that we see doing horrific things, I know they can't help it. They are just, the best way to look at it is let them remind you of how dark it gets when you don't choose the heart. Don't waste time. These monsters, this is nonsense. These man, no. See it as how lucky are you that you're not playing their role. How lucky are you that you don't have to play that role for humanity. We must really start drinking these lessons in our own hearts. We've done enough of this kind of
guilt.
We need to bring it into ourselves and find out, because we are all the same. Our conditioning is not very different. We have to really find out what it is in us that makes us operate like that. Because if we think, no, I would never do that, we are lying to ourselves. We're just lucky we have never been put in such contexts, that we were not raised in the same way, that we're not taught the same beliefs. But this human conditioning, this egoic conditioning is the same for everyone. And it's all nice when nothing is threatening it. But when the ego is under the light, it becomes a monster. It's not our friend.
Yes. Claudio Naranjo said, this is a Chilean teacher and educator, says that if you haven't met your inferno or your evil, you haven't started your spiritual path.
Very good.
Yeah,
it's very good. I think just yesterday I was speaking to someone And and I was just noticing how difficult it is for humanity to even accept, not even to accept, to even think. There are forces at play here. This is not an earthly world of people. This is a multi-layered cosmic cosmology. I mean, it's the infinite is playing here. There are many realms taking place in one. There are things happening beyond this basic, very basic education that we've all been indoctrinated with. There are forces at play here. There is the whole galactical dark versus light. All of these things are happening.
Yes, and happening inside of us, no? If we really see our minds, and I mean, this fight is inside of us.
Yes, well, in the absolute truth, it is all of this is happening inside you. Yeah. There is nothing happening outside of you. You are from where all this, when you disappear, everything disappears.
Yes.
It's all happening inside us.
Okay, I'm going to do one more question to finish. And it's about heart intelligence. And in Fundación Hypatia, we always talk about spiritual intelligence or heart intelligence, and how this intelligence that we have been talking about here can restore or heal what we need to heal, no? Can you tell us about this universal love force or yes, spirit, heart intelligence that live within us, like a message for young people? You know, we are very always like connected with young people who are thinking that we are in a collapse with no way back, with climate change and anxiety, etc. So just to talk about this love force that it's within us and in everything.
Yeah, so you're kind of already saying it. So all of this is love. It's a very strange thing to say, but nothing could be without love. You see, but we are not experiencing this love, so we don't know that. Our understanding of love is also a very dualistic understanding of love, because we ourselves take ourselves to be also separate. So the way we speak of love and think of love is dualistic. It's as if love is something that you have and you can offer to one, not to another. This is not the love that truly lives in our hearts. Which is why people fall to their knees crying when they get just a taste of this love. I mean, I don't know that any one human being could ever have the full blow of God's love. I don't think it'd be possible. I think it would probably blow you into infiniteness. So just this, imagine the entire universe is love, and just this little much is enough to bless the entire world. It's enough to make you go to bed blessing the entire world. You know, it's enough to make you never complain. It's enough to make you never badger somebody, never lose your temper. It really is something that it's the greatness of God. It's things that have been written in the Bible. It's been written in all these ancient texts, and it's real. It is what we are. We really have forgotten this, and we cannot get there intellectually. There has to be a leap of faith. There has to be a fire, a calling to have the direct experience of that. Because if we want love to satisfy our personal needs, or our egoic structures. That's not it. If we want to continue living with my attachments, with my beliefs and my thoughts, and experience this love, it's not going to happen. There is a reason why they speak of purity of heart. And sometimes we misunderstand this, no? Because we think, well, we have to become like this perfect little angel, or, can't eat these things, can't do that, can't do, somebody who's awake cannot do this and that. And this is all mind, again, creating all sorts of nonsense. But there is a truth to, if you're holding your ego, if you're holding on to fear, to separation, to arrogance, to righteousness, if you're hanging on to these things, you will not experience the vastness of this love. It is here for everyone, but if you don't want it, you don't want it. You're free to be free, and you're free to be bound. So this love is real, and if anyone would hear my words, it is real. There is a love holding us all, holding everything. We are all going to die. These bodies, all of them, are going to perish. Every body that's on this planet in 100 years is gone. Gone. So to lose our energy in fighting and resisting and engaging with this psychological mind, which lives in the world, lives in accordance to others, to lose more energy in that is a waste of our time. There is such it's such an act of love to sit quietly. It is such a mighty act of love to sit quietly, because you are literally saying, I'm tired of being in the front seat. I've made a mess of this. I don't have the capacity. Who am I to even have the capacity? I choose love. I choose God. I take the back seat. Because there is an intelligence that is so available to inform everyone in the highest ways, but not as long as we're convinced that we know better. So how does this happen? Of course, I don't know. How does, this is, I'm just another soldier of Christ. It's just.
Thank you so much, Richie. I think this last question was the best way of ending this interview. It has been a privilege to listen to you and to have this interview, and I hope that everybody who watches can keep these words in their heart and feel this love that it's here all the time for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aleka. Thank you for this opportunity to share what I feel so blessed to share. It is an absolute blessing that I can speak like this.
Thanks to you. So
yeah,
goodbye to everybody, and see you soon in the Virtuous networks of Hypatia Foundation. Bye-bye.